Good morning, everyone. It is June 12th, Thursday morning, and the U.S. is seeing really two zones of active severe type thunderstorms. One is down here in East Texas, increasingly spreading into portions of Louisiana, Arkansas, and even southern Missouri. And another band is along this cool front that extends really from Michigan all the way over into Montana, but it's this portion of it that is really going to be active over the next couple of days, along with some front range activity, especially tomorrow. Let's take a look at the HRRR computer model. This is a computer model that's run every hour. Every 6 hours, they run it out for 2 days. And so we can take a look at what it thinks the radar will look like. And you can see that this activity in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas continues to kind of reinvent itself. Very slow moving upper level weather system that produces rounds of severe weather. And you can also see, speaking of that, rounds of severe weather here across Minnesota and Wisconsin, and also across portions of Nebraska as well. So that's how this next few days unfolds, at least according to this particular model's opinion. The severe thunderstorm outlook today is highest in parts of western Nebraska up into South Dakota, but it's a smattering of weaker occurrences of hail and large winds. Very little tornado potential with any of this, really. I'll show you where there is. But here through eastern Pennsylvania, around Atlanta and Charlotte, along the front range of the Rockies from New Mexico into Denver area, eastern Colorado, southern Minnesota, we talked about that. And then this area right here, even though it's not the highest risk area, it hasn't gone up to the slight risks, which is 2. There is a tornado risk today in this area, which is a 2% tornado risk that runs from the boot heel of Missouri all the way down through eastern and central Arkansas, parts of Mississippi, all the way down to the Houston area, and ultimately almost down to the Corpus Christi area. So it's not a real high tornado chance, but it does suggest that there is a weak chance that one cell, perhaps somewhere in this mess, could produce a tornado, especially if it's given proper interaction with other cells, smaller scale interactions that maybe don't always show up until hours before they actually occur. On Nadocast, this is actually putting that emphasis more down from Houston inland a little bit, and through, from Little Rock south, basically almost to Shreveport. So the highest risk in there is 5%, which is a little higher than the SPC has gone for. And when I update this Nadocast, this is based on 0Z data, which means this is based on data from 7 p.m. last night. They do update this later in the morning, and I always check it to see if it changes significantly. If you want to go to the link in the website, is down in the link description below. We can just briefly look at SIPS today, which does put severe weather risks in about that same area. It emphasizes Denver a little bit more in the Panhandle in Nebraska and around Cheyenne, Wyoming, and also talks about this area out in Pennsylvania. The CSU learning machine does put that tornado risk, orients it a little bit differently, but you also have to keep in mind that sometimes when this is run, it actually, the times don't sync up quite right. So this is maybe meant for a time scale that basically includes tomorrow morning as well. And then up in Nebraska, we have that hail risk, and the high wind risk is not being highlighted a whole lot, although they do put a slight tornado risk up there in South Dakota. If we go ahead to Friday, this is an arc, basically, of severe weather possible from southern Montana right down through western Nebraska, ending in the Panhandle region. That's a 2 out of 5 risk. There's a tornado risk embedded in that in the Panhandle of Nebraska. So right around Scottsbluff, basically, in a fairly dense, sparsely populated area of Nebraska, Sand Hills area. But nevertheless, there is a slight risk of tornadoes there. On CSU's model, they kind of talk about that in the tornado risk and also up in Montana, but it's a pretty puny tornado risk that we're actually talking about, which is actually a lot more common as we get deeper into summer. Friday, the hail risk is up in Montana and Nebraska in line with the SPC forecast. On Saturday, still kind of a broad area. This is level 1. As is always, usually by the time we get to either Friday or even Saturday morning, there's room in this outlook for maybe, an embedded slightly higher risk area once we have better model data and we see how the previous days had unfolded. But so just keep in mind that those areas are under risk. But really, that's the only area in the country right now that has any severe weather activity possible on Saturday. CSU does put a tornado risk up there in South Dakota, and keeps some of the hail risks up there in South Dakota, Nebraska, and parts of Montana. Pretty low risk, though. When you see that yellow, it's a 15% chance. And then on Sunday, now CSU changes it from a 4-panel to a 2-panel. And this is nice because it usually puts the SPC it does put the SPC forecast on the right. There isn't one for Sunday, and there isn't anything in the day 4 through 8 category. But it does kind of outline generally where severe weather is going to be occurring. And there's going to be a real common theme. Here's Sunday, and then here's Monday. Hardly moves, expands a little. Here's Tuesday, maybe goes into the Corn Belt a little bit. Not a whole lot of activity. Here's Wednesday. It just kind of shifts east. Now, what's happening here is the jet stream is becoming more active here, so these storms are interacting with the southern end of that, basically, and that's a very common occurrence for mid-June and getting into the summer type of season. And I use supercell composite, basically sums up supercell probabilities over that 7-day period in the upper right, which is the exact same period I just reviewed. So it does show still some activity in Texas. Remember, this is an accumulative forecast, so this stuff is meant for the early part of the next 7 days. This activity is meant for the middle and later part of that next 7-day period. And if we go ahead a week now, almost to the end of June, certainly southern Canada, Montana, the Dakotas really under the gun. A little slight area, there could be a slight little southern stream, little disturbance in there that's causing a flare up there. It looks like that also might be a frontal boundary right here. The tail end of it might be causing a little bit more supercell activity there in Oklahoma and Arkansas. And then getting into July 2nd, June 21st through July 2nd, definitely the supercell probability shift from Nebraska northward as far east as Wisconsin, again in fitting with what happens typically to severe weather as we approach the heart of the summer season. In fact, it kind of goes away beginning in July with a few exceptions, but we're still very much in severe weather season through the end of June typically, and certainly in 2025 that remains to be the case. Thanks for watching today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. This is published every day after the morning Storm Prediction Center update. Also, remember to check that site off on day 1 because they update it fairly frequently. If you like this video, please like it. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.